Hello! In this video we'll go over all abilities available to the jobs Botanist and Miner. Afterwards we'll also have a look at some basic rotations that you will need to efficiently farm items. There are different kinds of items that you can farm throughout the world, and each one requires a few abilities to farm efficiently. The nodes we'll focus on in this video are Untimed, Timed, and Collectibles. Untimed items can be found at any time of day and are generally always available. Timed items such as unspoiled or legendary nodes are time limited and usually only spawn a single node. Because of that, the method for farming them is drastically different from farming untimed nodes. The last type, Collectibles, has its own set of abilities to farm them. We can sort the abilities we get on both jobs into a few categories. Both Miner and Botanist share abilities, however some of them have different names. In this video I'll always mention the Miner ability first and then the Botanist ability to avoid confusion. The first category is Location Skills. These are used to find nodes and to reach them. Prospect Triangulate lets you see nodes throughout the world and the minimap. This is activated automatically when switching to Botanist and Miner, so you don't need to keep this on your hotbar. Lay of the Land Arbor Call will show you the nearest node. This is useful when flying from node to not get lost. The second level of this ability will show you the highest level node instead. Sneak allows you to gather items undisturbed by enemies, as long as you are at least 4 levels below theirs. Truth of Mountains, Truth of Forest will reveal special legendary nodes. We'll cover these later on. Luck of the Pioneer will reveal hidden items inside a node to you. Whether an item is hidden or not can be seen inside the gathering log. When you reach a node that's supposed to have a hidden item, you can pop this ability to reveal it. Next up, there are various abilities that increase our chance to gather items or our yield from a successful gathering attempt. Sharp Vision, Field Mastery 1, 2, and 3 increase our chance to gather items by 5, 15, and 50%. This is mostly used while leveling and hardly ever in the late game, because once you have good gear, your chance to gather these items will be high enough all the time. Clear Vision, Flora Mastery will do the same thing as Sharp Vision Field Mastery, but instead only applies to the next gathering attempt, meaning one hit. This can be situationally useful, but for the most part this ability isn't needed. Bountiful Yield, Bountiful Harvest level 2 will increase the amount of items gained from your next gathering attempt by up to 3. This is determined by your gathering rating. This ability is extremely efficient in comparison to other abilities, as we'll see later on. Solid Reason, Ageless Words, will give you another gathering attempt and have a chance to trigger Eureka Moment, allowing the use of Wise to the World, which is a free ability that will give you another point of integrity. This ability is very useful later on and can be used on many different nodes. King's Yield, Blessed Harvest 2, will increase the amount of items gained from gathering attempts by 2 for the entire duration of that node. This is a great ability that we'll use a lot, however it is very expensive at 500 GP. Mountaineer's Gift, Pioneer's Gift 1 and 2 will increase your chance to get Gatherer's Boon by 10 or 30%. Gatherer's Boons are essentially crits that give you additional items for each gather attempt. This is useful while leveling and occasionally during late game for farming legendary nodes. Nalthar's Tidings, Nofika's Tidings will increase the yield from Gatherer's Boon by 1, and therefore it's often comboed with Mountaineer's Gift, Pioneer's Gift. It's a powerful ability that we'll use a lot. Next up, there are 2 abilities dedicated to farming shards, crystals, and clusters. These are the 12's Bounty, which will increase yield by 3 and can be spammed without cooldown, as well as the Giving Land, which will increase the yield by a random amount. Unlike the 12's Bounty, this ability is on a cooldown, and therefore it should always be used whenever it's available when farming shards, crystals, and clusters. Lastly, there are collectible items. Collectibles are gathered inside a special window that pops up when you attempt gathering them, so you don't need to keep them on your hotbar. We will discuss these abilities in more detail when we move on to collectibles, so they make more sense. The abilities are Scour, Brazen Prospector, Brazen Woodsman, Meticulous Prospector, Meticulous Woodsman, Scrutiny, and Collector's Focus. All of these can be used inside the collectible window, so you can theoretically just remove them from the hotbar. Let's focus on how to gather untimed items efficiently first. These will appear inside the node indicated inside your gathering log at all times, and the yield we get from them can be increased using various abilities. To gather efficiently, we will only use 1 or 2 abilities on these nodes before moving on to the next one. Because there's always another node available, we optimize the overall amount of items we farm by only using abilities when they can have their maximum effect. Which abilities we use depends on the location effect. You can see this effect in 3 different spots on the UI, but the easiest one is this little box in your gathering window. The different location effects possible are as follows. Gatherer's Boon Chance, Integrity, or Yield. If the node has increased Gatherer's Boon Chance, that means your chance of getting multiple items is increased. With max level gear, this usually means you'll get an additional item on every single gathering attempt. To make use of this effect, we'll use the ability Nofika's Tidings for Botanist or Nalthal's Tidings for Miners. This increases the yield from Gatherer's Boon by 1, making it valuable on nodes where the bonus is guaranteed. On a node with 4 integrity points, which indicates the number of gathering attempts possible, this gives us a value of 1 additional item per 50 GP spent, considering either of the Tidings abilities only cost 200 GP. If the node has increased integrity, that means you get an additional gathering attempt. In those cases, the most efficient ability to use is Blessed Harvest 2 for Botanists or King's Yield 2 for Miners. This will increase the yield by 2 items per gathering attempt, leading to a total of 10 additional items on 5 attempts. Just like the previous ability, this gives us a value of 1 item per 50 GP spent, considering the cost of 500 GP of each ability. If a node has increased yield, the most efficient ability to use, provided the yield increases at least 3 additional items per gathering attempt, is Ageless Words for Botanist or Solid Reason for Miners. This will increase the integrity by 1, allowing us another gathering attempt to make use of the increased yield. This has a value of 1 item per 75 GP spent. However, there's a 50% chance to trigger the trait Eureka Moment, which will allow the use of Wise to the World, which will restore an additional integrity. This leads to a value of 1 item per 37.5 GP spent, making this the most efficient ability to use if the effect triggers, but also the least efficient one if it doesn't. In short, this ability is a gamble that should even out over time. However, all of this is only true as long as the ability Bountiful Yield, Bountiful Harvest only gives 1 or 2 items. If we go back and have a look at it again, we can see that it increases the amount of items gained from your next gathering attempt by up to 3, determined by your gathering rating. Meaning, once you have good enough gear, you're always going to be farming 3 items. Meaning, once you reach 3 items gathered from Bountiful Yield, Bountiful Harvest, you get an efficiency of 1 item per 33 GP spent. This makes it the most efficient ability to use in almost all cases, unless you have extreme location effects. And the ability itself can be used without any location effects being present, so you don't even need to pay attention to it anymore. So at max level, once you have a set of crafted gear, you'll be running around gathering regular nodes like this, instead of using any of the other abilities. Essentially, for anything but time nodes and collectibles, you can forget about rotations at that point. Next up are timed items. These are only available during certain Eorzea times. You can check whether a node is timed by hovering over its spawn location in the gathering log. This will give you a time frame during which this node can be farmed. You can click the clock to change your time to Eorzea time to know when the node is available. And by right-clicking the spawn location inside the node, you can also set a timer. However, I found the in-game methods of tracking these nodes very clunky, and because of that, most people use websites such as Final Fantasy XIV Gathering to track spawn times. There'll be a link in the video description. When you farm a node like this, your goal will be to get the highest amount of items possible out of the single node, because it's going to respawn at the earliest half an hour later. This means we're going to spend almost all of our GP to get as many items out of the node as possible. Unlike regular nodes, multiple location effects can be active at the same time. To farm these, we'll want to play around the Boon bonus. Either you have the Boon bonus, or you don't. If you don't have the Boon bonus, things are very simple. You'll use King's Yield, Blessed Harvest 2, and spend the rest of your GP on Bountiful Harvest. If you do have a Boon bonus, you want to play more into getting the most out of your Gatherer's Boon. If you're not yet at 100% Gatherer's Boon chance, now is a good time to use Mountaineer's or Pioneer's Gift. Afterwards, you'll want to use King's Yield, Blessed Harvest 2, Tidings, and then use all remaining GP on Bountiful Harvest. Tiny optimizations from these basic rotations are always possible, depending on node effects, but they are generally not worth remembering. These 2 rotations will give you close to maximum efficiency for each node while being easy to remember. Lastly, let's cover collectible nodes. Collectible items are special in that their only purpose is being turned into a collectible appraiser for scripts, or occasionally to be the target of ethereal reduction. You can see if you're dealing with a collectible item when it has this symbol, and clicking on it opens a separate menu. A collectible's quality is measured in collectability, which can be tracked here. Below that, almost all abilities needed for collectible nodes are shown. Using any of these abilities will reduce the node's integrity. Your basic ability to increase collectability is Scour. This button is used most of the time when increasing collectability, unless there is a special proc. Once you have great gear for the node that you're on, you're going to move away from Scour and use another ability. Brazen Prospector, Brazen Woodsman is just like Scour, but instead of giving a fixed amount of collectability, the gain can range from 50 to 150% of the effectiveness of Scour. Use this if you're feeling lucky, but generally we won't use this in our rotation. Meticulous Prospector, Meticulous Woodsman will increase the collectability by 75% of Scour, but there's a chance that you don't lose any integrity when using the ability. Collect is what we use to get our collectibles once the integrity is at the level we want it at. And finally, Scrutiny is a buff to our collectability increasing abilities and will be used to get more collectibles out of each node by decreasing the amount of other abilities we need to use, which would reduce our integrity. As your gathering rating improves, so will the collectability you get from Scour, Brazen and Meticulous. Depending on the breakpoint you hit, the rotation will be different. If your abilities don't give you the highest amount of collectability gain possible, and you have less than 400 GP, your rotation will consist only of spamming Scour as much as possible to get whatever collectability you can out of the node until you get your hands on better gear. If you have at least 400 GP, your rotation will look like this. Start by using Scrutiny, follow up with Scour, use another Scrutiny. If you have Collector standard proc, use Meticulous. If you don't have a proc, just use Scour again. Afterwards, check for a proc again and use Scour or Meticulous without buffing them using Scrutiny, before using Collect to gather whatever you got. Once you get close to the highest rating on a collectible node, your rotation will change to increase your collectible yield. Our goal here is to increase the amount of times we can use Collect by using Meticulous in place of Scour, which, as you might remember, has a chance to not use any integrity. However, I cannot overstate that this is only efficient when our gear is good enough. First of all, use Scrutiny, then Meticulous, another Scrutiny, and now if your rating is 800 and you have a proc, use Meticulous, or alternatively, if your rating is 850 or higher, use Meticulous as well, because it will give you the highest collectability even without the proc. If you have a rating of 800 and no procs, use Scour to ensure maximum collectability, and afterwards collect as many items as possible once you reach 1000 collectability. On timed collectible nodes, you can also use Ageless Words, Solid Reason, to grant you up to 2 more integrity. This is only efficient on timed nodes, however. If you can simply go to the next collectible nodes, you'd be better off just farming whatever you can and using the GP on increasing collectability on the next node. These are all the things you need to remember for Miner and Botanist abilities. I'll be releasing a similar video for Crafters in the future, so subscribe to the channel to not miss it. If you're still leveling your gatherers, this video here is a must watch, as I go over the methods that I use to level Botanist and Miner as efficiently as possible, saving you not only time but also gil. Thanks for watching, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. Peace.